Welcome to the show, Ron.
Thank you.
Ron, thank you for being with us today. I know this has been a challenging time, to say the least, and you're no doubt experiencing a range of emotions while trying to process all that has transpired and to work with the people in the community. And we want to provide you with some space and the opportunity to talk about how you're feeling and how you're processing everything that is happening.
Thank you. I do want to thank the American Muslim Institution and my sister Horanessa and Rabbi Susan. This conversation is important for a number of reasons, particularly for an older African American like me, who was born in the 50s. And we've seen these range of conversations and these range of conflicts in our community, and the range of supposedly solutions and resolutions and attempts to do better, and yet we still find ourselves here today. So some of it is a sense of anger and frustration that we haven't done better about police brutality in particular. And the outcry for that as a community should not have always been one-sided. And I'd like to think that our communities are more aware, and I think our people are, based on what we've seen in the last 3 to 4 weeks, in terms of, I call it an intergenerational, an interfaith, an intercommunity outcry, where people of all stripes are saying this is wrong. And that I'm encouraged by that outcry, but we have to do more than be encouraged. We have to do more than listen to rhetoric. We have to do more than just pray and gather. And it's good that people come together, but it's finding those solutions and then seeking those common purposes that will tie us together as a community that have divided us as a community, is where the work comes in. And so I'm happy to be here today to really talk about kind of that allyship and that partnership piece. But I can tell you personally, I am not fatigued of doing this work. The last, I guess I started when I was about 5, because my dad was a rent strike leader in New York. And I was voluntarily bused before busing was an enforced act in New York City to a Jewish neighborhood. And I like to joke that I've been to more bar mitzvahs than I've been to weddings. But the idea is that as a community, what happened for me was I learned. I was immersed. I had experiences. I had values that were shared, and I had an appreciation for other faiths and other cultures that it just seems so strange to me that people today don't have, and are not willing to have. And we still call that Sunday, as if we can only worship on Sundays. That Sunday worship hour between 11 and 12 is the most segregated hour. But what about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? We pray all over, so why can't we gather on any other time except Sunday? So I'm happy to be here, but thank you for asking.
Thank you so much, Ron. Ron, can I ask you to move a little closer to your laptop because the volume is a bit low? And if your phone is near your laptop, if you could move it away, because there is a kind of a hissing sound that comes sometimes from the phone. Thank you. Okay, so I mean, I know this conversation is so long, and I don't think we can cover everything just in one episode. But you know, a lot of people have been posting, you know, Black pages on their Facebook and their social media, and people are using this word allyship a lot lately, you know, in various definitions. I would like to talk, you know, have you talk about what allyship isn't, you know, in the Black Lives Matter movement.
Well, let me just talk about allyship, period, because I don't think it's particular to the Black Lives Movement. And even if people were to Google the definition of ally or look at, you know, Webster's dictionary, where we find ourselves today is in this experience of trust and integrity about how people relate and how they experience each other. So I think whether it's the Black Lives Movement or any movement, you know, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, allyship, and any other types of partnership, it's this genuineness that comes across where the integrity is trusted, that somebody's there because they really value your humanness, they value your cause, they value your mission, and it's not just popular because it's the popular thing to do. It's not the political thing to do. It's the human and the personal thing to do. And so I think what people are looking for today is that someone that's willing not just to stand by their side, but stand up. So it's not someone who goes to the march and demonstration and then refuses to have that conversation at home, or refuses to have that conversation on their job because something's at risk. It's someone who genuinely understands and feels that this is standing next to someone has an important value and role in all of our communities, all of our lives. And that's the personal piece that you can't always see or judge, but it's what people want now. They don't want it to come and go. They want it to somehow, these relationships to be sustained. So it's more than just, raising your fist or wearing a sign or wearing a button. It's really understanding what's at stake if we fail to be allies for one another in all of our experiences.
One of our speakers a couple of weeks ago spoke about the idea of being an upstander and not just a bystander, and that may fit with what you're talking about. And I want to talk a little bit more about this idea of allyship, because I think one of the challenges that's been raised is that there are many people who have expressed that they want to help, but they're just not sure where to start and what to do. So how can people, if people say, I want to be an ally, or I feel like I'm an ally, but how do I do that? What are some active steps? What are some things that people can do?
The best way I can describe it is, part of what's missing, and I'm the executive director of the Loudoun Freedom Center, and we talk about African American history in Loudoun County, and the deficit for our school systems and what they teach is that people's histories have been either deliberately left out or chopped up in a way that people don't understand roles, relationships, and connections. So my experience as an American shouldn't be any different than any other immigrant experience except for the period of slavery. The rights, the roles, and responsibilities as an American citizen should be ours, but there's been these disruptions where it's not been as equally applied for all of us. Who teaches someone that? If I have to become the teacher, then I am confronting everything that person has learned that they think is true. And then I get to be attacked based on I'm only saying it because it's my truth. Now, an effective ally has to be willing to learn. How do they learn? Where do they learn? Who do they learn from? I always used to say, I spent my working career in higher education, that when I was hired, it wasn't on a job description that I was hired to train or teach white people how to be better. That would have required a little bit more money and a little bit more time. But in a partnership relationship, having each other's experiences, I have no problem helping people learn history, but they also have to be willing to put in some time and some energy. So learning requires work, and working sometimes requires being side by side as an ally. Then I think people have to add their voice. They have to be willing to look at their voice in the conversation. Don't just sit back and say, Ron, I want to glean it off from you. No, I want your voice to be just as powerful as it plays a role. And then showing up. People have to show up and invite people in. So it's not that you have to come to everything that's Black, but I also want to see your communities, because I may not have those inroads into your community. You may not have them into mine, but are we willing to show up in each other's places? Like I've said, I've been to many synagogues and many different circumstances. I'm not sure how many people know what a brisk is, but it's something that you have to witness to believe. But there are things that we all can appreciate. if we show up. And sometimes there's actually some good food too, particularly when you break Ramadan. And the challenge then is, at the end of the day, and this is the hard part, are people willing, and this was the same in the 70s, in the 80s, and the 90s when it came to issues of race, are people willing to challenge their own communities for what's at stake? Because that challenge may be offensive to your family and others in the community. You may lose friends, partnerships, and you may lose what you think is status or appeal. But to do what's right sometimes requires that ability to be strong enough to voice what you really believe in is right.
Thank you. Just following up, and I think you really answered this question already, but maybe we can take it a little bit further. Is it allyship? Would you consider it allyship if other communities ask leaders or members of the Black community to teach them what they can do and how they can be true allies? Or where should the responsibility lie? Should the responsibility lie on the shoulders of those who are not part of the Black community to educate themselves? And I guess the question that goes along with that is, that's true allyship to me, but I want to hear what it is to you, more importantly, for people to take the initiative to do that learning and to do that hard work of educating themselves. And I think there are many of us who also want to make sure that we're educating ourselves in the way we need to be to really be true allies, if that makes sense. Like, how can we really, what are the steps we should take? What should we be learning? And as someone said in a conversation 2 weeks ago, it's not enough just to have the books on the shelf, but it's doing that work that you talked about. And what is that work? Where should people start?
Well, thank you for that follow-up, because it is a little deeper than just having a change of heart or having a political consciousness or awareness. And there certainly is no magic bullet. I mean, we all have different paths for how we got to be where we are, or whatever it is we believe in. But there are some things I think that are effective. As I looked at the definition, it's always valid to ask for help. It's always valid. And however that help may be. Some of us are at different places. It's like, it'd be crazy for me to assume. We used to say this in the 70s, everybody's not Black just because they're Black, in the sense of somebody's consciousness. So I may be at a tipping point where the last thing I want is a white person to come and ask me for some help, when all I want to do is torch the city. So we really have to be conscious and aware of the humility that we bring to that question when we're asking someone to share, because it is personal and it could be sensitive. And no matter how genuine the person asking might be, the reality is that it may take a relationship to make that happen, because there's a trust. And as I said before, I used to get challenged a lot on my version of history as being my truth versus the truth that was taught in schools. And they called it truth, and that's how I taught history in schools. So the openness to understand about what it takes and what it means and what someone's asking for, I think starts with a personal relationship. And that's where people should start. Ask me my experience, my values. Ask me about my family, my growing up in the Bronx, where I spent many of a Christmas Eve in the 41st Police Precinct, because my dad decided to lead a rent strike, and it was important for him to use his family as an example in leading that rent strike. So my passion, comes from a place that's, been with me for over, 62 years. So I think that's helpful for people. It's never incorrect to ask for help. The only judgment may be, who are you asking? Why are you asking? And is it appropriate to ask at this particular time?
I did ask before about what allyship isn't, and I asked that specifically because a lot of people feel the things that they're doing and the impact that they're having is allyship, when it actually isn't what the Black community wants or needs. And I actually wanted you to kind of expand on that, what allyship isn't, because I see people who may be white, who are experts, they call themselves experts in history or what they have learned, and they're sitting on panels and having this discussion and talking about racism, and it undermines the work of the Black community, right? Or people saying that they're not racist, right? But because their faith maybe is telling them that racism is not part of who we are as Muslims or people of the Jewish faith or Christian or whatever faith they believe in, but they themselves do have racist propensities when it comes to certain types of people. So I wanted to kind of have you dive into that, because people really need to know how they might be hurting the process and hurting their own way of understanding what allyship means.
You crossed a very important line, and a good one to cross. This whole idea about racism and even the impacts of systemic racism and the impacts of what a person thinks about themselves and their own values as being racist versus not racist, and the whole definition of how we look at and again I call it this systemic challenge to beliefs, whether they be religious beliefs, cultural beliefs, or social beliefs. Somehow I'm not racist because I have a Black friend. I'm not racist because I belong to the NAACP. I'm not racist because my forefathers and the civil rights movement in the Jewish community, we were all allies. I'm not racist because I'm a Muslim. So how does a person see themselves in their racism versus their ability to be an ally? And sometimes people separate the two, and that's the mental challenge. That when I say we really have to break down people and relationships and really start to engage. It was important mental work in the 70s, and it's important personal mental work now, where people have to unlearn things that they've learned and be willing to get challenged personally about really re-envisioning human relationships at the end of the day. The stuff about race and religion, it's only one way to get to heaven, or there's only one way to be Black. And we have those conflicts. We don't call them racist within the African American culture, but we do have different communities. So how people see me as a Black person or American of African descent, or an African American, it may be different than how they see another person sitting next to me. So the question I think you're really asking is, how do we get this out? How do we get people to reveal themselves and who they are, even before we get to the point of allyship and partnership? Because it's not, and this is why it perpetuates and it continues, because it's not an easy thing. It really is. It's not getting someone to reveal their racism. And I think we hear this other term that people are using now, is how do you get to be somebody to be anti-racist? Which is a whole nother level of maturity and another level of work. So if you were to ask me, if you do this, does this mean that you're an ally? Or if you don't do this, does it mean you're not an ally? When I don't know who you are, and I don't know your struggles or your problems. So I'm just gonna be real simple. Allies don't disappear, right? It's not a flavor of the month, flavor of the week. It's not when things get hot or cold. Allies are willing to stand, and then willing, again, not just to come out, but to invite you in. So I'm willing and have been willing to go into many communities that are willing to invite me to do things that may be personally uncomfortable. But it's a struggle for me to get those same allies to come to an NAACP meeting. Why is that? I'm just asking them to come to a meeting, not asking them to pray, convert, eat. Just come to a meeting and listen and learn, and we cannot get the turnout. Now, fortunately, in Loudoun County, the NAACP membership has increased over the last couple of years, and people are looking for work to do. But it is somewhat more personal than what we really want to believe, and less political, because that political outcome would mean more people like me are getting elected, and they're not. More people like me are getting supported to even run for office and encouraged, and we're not. But we're being used for our votes but we aren't being used for the outcomes of legislation and policies. And now it seems like, okay, Black Lives Matter must mean that you're anti-police rather than you're looking for justice and law enforcement. And we all know the criminal justice system has been broke for a while. So if we take that personal piece and we turn it into actionable piece, we have to get results. We haven't taken that personal piece because it gets abandoned at the voting booth.